Can you describe the offensive scheme to our listeners that may not be as familiar with the Army offense?
Yeah, well, they're going back to last year they went to a shotgun offense. They called it a gun option, where they took, I would say, 98% of their snaps from the shotgun. Um, they were a triple option offense. They were a kind of a flex bone offense where you have the quarterback under center in the past. Forever they've done it under Jeff Monken. They have a fullback, which they call a B back, behind the quarterback, and they have two slot backs lined up kind of near each tackle, and they'll use a tight end or a wide receiver in their old set. And that's what they're going back to this year more. Last year with the shotgun offense, mixed bag, mostly not so great. There were times where they just couldn't score. There were times where they struggled to move the football. There were times where they tried plays that just didn't work and put them in a hole behind schedule. And you say 6-6 last year, right? And yes, they beat Army and Air Force, but their defense deserved better last year. Their defense played pretty well in games, and they just got let down by their offense, who couldn't score. When you don't score an offensive touchdown in your opener against Louisiana Monroe, not a good sign. Just not a good sign. So Jeff Monken decided what made Army different in the past was their offense and their scheme. So that's what they're going to go back to more this year. You'll still see some plays out of the gun. It'll probably be the opposite this year, where there'll be more out of under center and less out of the shotgun. But they have a quarterback back, Bryson Daly, that showed he can do he was recruited to do the under center stuff, but he showed he could be pretty effective out of the shotgun too. So they'll hope to keep AAC teams guessing once they hit that conference schedule.
That's an interesting point you make, because so many teams, most college teams are shotgun based, and those fans always wonder, like, why it was first and goal and you don't line up under center. You're not used to it, right? I guess in your case, where you're a predominantly run based offense, and you're starting, and everyone knows that, and you're starting your offense 5 yards further back.
That was a problem last year.
I can see where that would be a problem.
Short yardage, and you have a big back like Jacoby Buchanan, who's 260 pounds, who's picked up probably 25 fourth downs in his career, maybe even more, I'm guessing there. And you're lining up 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and you're getting stuffed on fourth down or third and short, and then have to settle for field goals. And it just didn't work. It just didn't work. They hired Drew Thatcher, who was at a Division II school before. He came to Army, and he never was a coordinator at an FBS or a coach at I think he had some assistant coaching at New Mexico State. I take that back. But when you're not a coordinator at a high level of that, some of the plays that worked at the Division II are not going to work against an FBS defense. Just the end arounds, the different trick plays just rarely worked. And, they moved on. Thatcher's left, and they went to Cody Worley, who was their quarterbacks coach, who probably they should have made the offensive coordinator last year, to be honest with you. And so he's now the offensive coordinator, and they're going to their strengths, so to speak.
And about those strengths, Army has always been strong at running the game, in the running game. And 2023 was kind of no difference, as they ranked 8th in rushing for 208 yards per game. So let's start by looking at the position that keeps the rushing offense humming, and that's the quarterback. Last year's starter Bryson Daly and backup Dwayne Coleman are returning this year. How did that quarterback room look this spring?
Yeah, Bryson Daly is experienced. He started 10 out of the 12 games, and the 2 games that he didn't start, he was a little bit banged up, and he came in one of them. He didn't play at LSU, but he did come in UMass in the second half. Yeah, Bryson Daly didn't need to take too many. He didn't need to take every snap this year, even though they were going back to the under center offense. That's the offense he was recruited to play. So they try to, I asked Coach Monken at the beginning, I think they only had like 4 quarterbacks in preseason camp. Spring football. And I'm like, is that enough? Is that enough? Because I thought you wanted to get more people looks. They don't have a lot of experience back. Dwayne Coleman played sparingly in a couple games last year in like a fourth quarter, or when they needed to, I think they need to throw the ball in a game late, and he came in, or they situational thing late. He came in. He doesn't have a lot of experience. And the guys that were in spring, Zach Mundell is a guy who I think they would like to be their number 2 quarterback, But Zach has just had some injuries that he's battled. He battled some injuries again this spring. Last year, he was like a slot receiver to get him on the field because he does have some playmaking ability. But if they can get Zach Mundell healthy, there's your number 2 quarterback. We'll see. And then they had a freshman, Cale Helms, who, was recruited for the triple option offense, flexbone offense, and he showed some signs. Those are their 4 quarterbacks. Unfortunately, the 2 freshman quarterbacks from the 2023 season hit the transfer portal. When they were when they went from shotgun back to more under center, Champ Harris, who started 2 games for Army last year as a true freshman right out of high school, no prep school, no redshirt year. He started at LSU, was his first start of his career. He went into the transfer portal. And Larry Robinson, who was the number 3 quarterback last year, also went into the transfer portal. So, I think that's going to be developing depth behind Bryson Daly. Certainly going to be one of their things that they want to get done in the preseason because, Daly's going to carry the ball a lot. In these service academy games, he carries the ball 25, 30 times a game. He's going to take his hits. He's a physical kid. He's about 215 pounds and about 6 foot, a little bit bigger for a triple option offense in the Army's scheme. But, he got banged up last year and missed the game. They're going to need to find that number 2 guy in preseason camp, no doubt. And there are freshmen coming in, but it's really hard to ask a freshman at West Point to be a number 2 guy. Champ Harris was a quarterback prodigy. His dad was a quarterback coach for Lamar Jackson. He worked with Lamar Jackson. He was a quarterback, this is what he wanted to do for probably since he could walk, so we'll see who they get, how they develop that depth behind Daly.
Moving over to that strong running game and the running backs, they return exciting freshmen, Kanye Udo, Tyrell Robinson, Miles Stewart, and others. They do lose Jacoby Buchanan, the fullback that you mentioned earlier, Tyson Riley, and Markel Johnson to graduation. How did those guys look in the spring, and kind of who stepped up to kind of fill that vacated fullback role?
Yeah, well, first off, losing Buchanan, he was a 5th-year guy last year, but he was their short yardage guy, touchdown scorer. Tyson Riley was probably their MVP of the offense last year because he was a H-back. He was a tight end. He rushed for over 100 yards as a fullback against Coastal Carolina in a win against Coastal Carolina. Big loss. Markel Johnson wasn't a graduation loss. Markel Johnson is just no longer, just left the team. Kanye Udo, they weren't going to give Kanye Udo 90% of the snaps in the spring. He proven himself. They want to keep him healthy, but then he got, according to Coach Monken, he got a little banged up in spring football. So he didn't have to, he didn't really get the majority of the fullback looks. They had AJ Williams, a senior, who's going to be a senior this year. He's a guy who was recruited to play fullback in this offense. Last year when they moved to the shotgun, he started linebacker, then he was a tight end, then he's back in the spring as a fullback. Pretty big size kid, 235 pounds, big size kid. They also have Jake Rendina, who was a freshman last year, another H-back guy who they recruited to play fullback, but when the fullbacks were eliminated from the shotgun offense, he played an H-back role, 1 career carry last year. But if you watch him in the spring, he's more of the prototype Army guy. He's like 260 pounds, like 5'10", I think. Power lifter guy, going to move the pile type guy. And there was good news after the spring. Hayden Reed is back on the team. Hayden Reed was a guy who his freshman year was on the field a lot for Army. Last year, I thought he would fit the fullback, the single back role in the shotgun really well. He could do everything. He could run the ball. He's a good blocker. He could receive out of the backfield. But I think he had a 100-yard game against UTSA in the road win. And then his snaps got maybe a little bit banged up. Udo start taking those first team snaps, and Hayden Reed left the team before spring. He's now back on the team. Good news. They need to build another spot where Army needs depth in this offense. You got to have, when they were really good, say 2016 to 2018, they had a stable of fullbacks. They had 4 or 5 guys that they would rotate. They had Darnell Woolfolk, Andy Davidson, Kalen Hull, Sandon McCoy, Connor Slomka. They had 5 of those guys in one season, and those guys turned out to be real. Those guys are really, I think, maybe all of them had 1,000-yard careers. So just they got to build depth in the fullback room. Udo's the guy. Udo's going to be the man. Hayden Reed and Jake Rendina probably behind him. And then you go A.J. Williams and probably Jarrell Dixon, both seniors who've waited their turn behind those guys.
Udo being a freshman, it's not often that you see a true freshman make an impact at any of the service academies. So it's great to hear that, he's looking for even bigger things coming here in 2024.
Physical dude, going to run you about 220 pounds, but athletic. He did get a year at the prep school. He didn't come right out of St. Augustine Prep in New Jersey, but still was a factor. I think he was voted like All East Rookie of the Year or something like that by the ECAC. So he was the freshman of the year for the schools that they encompass. So, I mean, they expect big things out of him. And in this offense, I think they even better maybe things out of him for this offense because he is a physical guy. He can break into the open field, and they're going to need those big plays in this offense. So.
Well, the wide receiver is a position not utilized a lot in this offense, and they do lose Iwan Marshall and to graduation and Isaiah Alston transferred to Iowa State. How did this group shape up in the spring?
Yeah, well, Iwan Marshall was a guy who was a slot back before he was a slot receiver last year. So, I mean, he's a guy who, was a pretty effective when they used him, he was a game breaker, but he didn't get the touches that maybe he should have gotten last year in that offense. So Isaiah Alston was, when he was on the field, he was good. When he missed some games toward the end of the season, he just disappeared, so to speak, toward the end. So now he's at Iowa State, and that's interesting to follow him and see if he could play at the level he played at Army at a Power 4 school, Power 5 school, however you want to describe it. He's got all the tools. I was at Syracuse game, and a couple NFL scouts were in the press box, and I asked them, so who are you really looking at Army? And this was the fourth game of the season last year. They're like, Isaiah Alston. If he was ready, if he was draftable, we would be very interested in him. So we'll see. I mean, maybe that's an NFL talent that they lost. Who knows? The guys that are coming back are Casey Reynolds, who was reliable. Casey Reynolds was, I think he led the team in reception yards last year. Toward the end of the season, him and Bryson Daly had a pretty good connection. Casey Reynolds also plays defensive midfield on Army's men's lacrosse team. Their season just ended this week, so he's a two-sport athlete. Liam Fortner is a physical wide receiver who probably should maybe gotten a little bit more looks last year. It's just a matter of circumstance in their offense. He's back junior year. And Toby Alawale, who's a freshman, who's came up with some big catches last year. And some, when the ball was thrown at him, he was able to produce. So, I mean, they're not going to throw the ball a lot in this offense. I mean, last year, I think maybe they hit like, say, 10 to 15 times a game. You're probably going to go back to 5 or 10 times a game. There's times where Coach Monken doesn't even throw the pass and just wants to run the football and win that way. I think they've won that way a handful of times under his watch where they haven't completed a pass. A couple games, they didn't even attempt a pass, so the wide receivers are there to block. They're there to block first and then catch the ball second pretty much in this offense.
Well, speaking of the offense and kind of where I guess the kind of leads the rushing game or is very important to the running game is the offensive line. They lose 2 starters and Jackson Filipowicz, Shane Buckingham, and then they do return Connor Finucane, Brady Small, Lucas Scott, who were starters in 2023, as well as David Hoyt and Jordan Law, who kind of were the top backups based on snaps last year. How did that group look this spring? Are they ready to continue to open up those holes for the running backs?
Yeah, I mean, first off, Connor Finucane, I wrote that he's getting a 5th year, and Coach Monken and Army staff say, wait, he's got to be approved by West Point, like West Point in general, not the athletic department, West Point, to come back for that extra semester to play again. He started 1 game his freshman year, has been a starter since his sophomore year on. So I think that's quick math tells me, I think 37 straight starts he's made or something like that. He's a guy who's reliable. He's a guy who I thought had a chance to even get a shot at the NFL after this season. But Something with still has to fulfill some requirements at West Point before he can graduate. So he's gonna try to come back, and they haven't listed him on the roster yet. But if he comes back, that changes the whole perspective of the offense because right now they have Booby Law at left tackle. They have David Hoyt at right tackle. Booby Law is a guy who started his freshman. He's going into his 5th season too. He's a guy who made a start his freshman year, was a starter. He had a serious knee injury his sophomore year, missed some time and was coming back from that. And a guy who was in the rotation early last year. Hoyt worked his way as a starter last year and started a handful of games, but it all centers around Brady Small, the center, starting center. As a freshman, he started all 12 games for Army. I mean, I can't tell you the last time they had a freshman starter at center ever. Maybe, who knows? It's going back a long time, and he was their most consistent player. He was at the snaps. When you're going from an under center to a shotgun offense, I can't recall a bad snap by Brady Small the whole season, and he had a really good year. I mean, I think that him and Kanye Udo played at the same high school, St. Augustine Prep. They played together at Army Prep before they came to West Point, and they had a kind of a pact together that they were going to make an impact in their freshman years, and they certainly did that. And I expect Brady Small to be really key in this offense. A guy like Bill Katsagiannis was supposed to be the starting center last year. In preseason, he was running number 1. He got injured, and it took him a while to recover from that injury. So Small stepped in. Katsagiannis was a guy who saw playing time here and there, but now he's looking as the starter at left guard. So, and it's his senior year now, so he's trying to make the most out of his senior year. And you have a guy like Lucas Scott, who last year, he's a guy who he was an all-state fullback, and he was recruited to play fullback in this offense. He just got too big. He just got too big, and then I think they had him play tight end a little bit, and then they put him in at offensive line, I believe his sophomore year. And after the first game last year, he stepped in and started the last 11 games for Army and was pretty consistent. He goes unnoticed, and that's good for an offensive lineman when you're not getting your number called for a penalty and you're being consistent. That's what he was last year. So they have some guys there that certainly they have some depth. Will Jeffcoat is a guy who missed last year with a knee injury, but played the year before and even started games the year before. So they have guys with experience. They have some younger guys coming up like Paolo Generale and Henry Appleton that are going to be sophomores. So, I mean, like you said, you're right. They need to get that offensive line is one of the keys to the season for them. I think they have enough offensive talent, like individual talent, to make that under center scheme work. Now it's just the offensive line has to hold their end of the bargain, and their motto is 5 like 1, so they got to play like that in these games. If the offensive line is humming, Army's could be in that top 3 rushing offensive attack in the nation. 8 is low, very low for Army. They want to be the top 1, 2, or 3 probably in the nation. I think they can get there. So.
All right, Sal, if you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season here in 2024, who would that be?
That's a good question. I mean, because you figure already had his breakout season. I'm going to say Noah Short. We didn't mention Noah Short. Noah Short was a guy who played defense his freshman year. He was a special teams guy. He had a block against in the Army-Navy game that led to the first touchdown for Army. Good special teams player. Last year, they moved him from defense to offense. They put him as a slot receiver. He made a couple big plays in the offense as a slot receiver. He had a touchdown catch against Syracuse. And now they're moving him. Now he moves to slot back. So he's going to play slot back with Tyrell Robinson. And I think at the beginning of the season, we'll see a lot of how involved they want to get the slot backs. He's a guy that can do a lot of different things. He may be one of the faster guys on the team. So we'll see if that can equate to more big plays from him. Tyrell Robinson did not participate in spring practice. He's a guy we should talk about a little bit before we get away from the offense. He's a guy who, before he injured his knee in the 2022 season at Wake Forest, he was a game breaker for them. And he got back midway through the season last year and was working his way back. And Coach Munkin wasn't specific on what the injury was that caused him to miss, not to practice in the spring. Maybe they just want to hold him off and get him ready for preseason, but he has some game-breaking ability. So if both of those slot backs can make some big plays for them and shorten the field for them, that'll certainly help. So I'll go Noah Short for that answer.